Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, October 1st edition of the MMAOB Daily Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin, and I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. It's pretty crazy. It's October already. Unreal. I feel like this year's gone by so fast. Like, I remember when this pandemic started, like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and it's crazy how far it's lasted now. So, hope everyone's staying safe. Hope everyone's doing well. We got a lot of MMA this weekend coming up. We got a Bellator card today, actually, so I'll be previewing that card today. Bellator 247, we do have odds for that, thankfully. UFC on ESPN 16, home Aldana, that's on Saturday night. I previewed that card with Cole Shelton on Tuesday, so definitely go back and check out that podcast if you missed it. There's also another Bellator card on Saturday. We don't have odds for that yet. I'll probably touch on it like briefly here today, but we don't have odds, so I can't break down the fights as well as I would, obviously, with odds. What else? Conor McGregor is obviously in the news again, talking about Dustin Poirier. Dana White's in there now as well, so I'll talk about that. Some news and fight announcements. Let's get right into today's show. So I'm going to start with Bellator 247. There's 4 fights with odds. I'll just focus on those 4 fights here. So it takes place today. It's on CBS Sports Network. It's Bellator's first event on CBS Sports Network, and it takes place in Italy. Now, the main event was supposed to be Derek Anderson against Paul Daly, but the fight was canceled due to Paul Daly having a really bad weight cut. So the fight's off. Derek Anderson, Paul Daly. That was the best fight in the card, I think, for sure. But the fight is no longer happening due to Daly's missed weight cut. And then he had problems after the weight cut, too. He posted a video on Instagram. You can go watch that if you want. He basically explained that he was having severe, cramping and stuff. And he said this is not unnormal for him. It usually does happen to him, but usually is cutting the weight in a private room. He said that in this case, he was in a big, open area where there's other fighters, doctors, etc., and people noticed he was not feeling very well. So the fight was canceled, which is unfortunate. But the rest of the card, I mean, it's not the greatest card. Let's be completely honest here. It's definitely not. But there are some interesting fights. There's a lot of European talent on this card. So, looking at the prelims now, there's a lot of guys that aren't very experienced and aren't big names, but we do have 4 fights, like I said, that we do have odds for, so I'll talk about those right now. Let's start with this fight. Chris Duncan against Iamak Furtado. According to Tapology, it's a 160-pound catchweight fight. I think both these guys normally fight at lightweight, so they're giving them 5 extra pounds here. Odds right now for this fight, Chris Duncan minus 250, Iamak Furtado plus 190. Just looking at these guys right now, let's pull this up here. Screen share. Let's do it. Share screen, and then where is it? Chris Duncan. There it is. Let's try this out. That working okay? Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. So taking a look at this guy. I mean, 6-0. They don't have his age listed, unfortunately. Scottish fighter. You're looking at his record: 3 straight wins in Bellator by knockout. And it's pretty good, right? Again, the guys he's fighting are not super high level competition. Like you look at some of the guys he fought before Bellator: 2-0, 0-0, 5-7. Not great fighters. Last guy was 14-5. That's not bad, but he's only fighting 2 years as a pro. He's already 6-0 with 6 finishes, or 6 finishes actually. Yeah, 5 by stop strikes, and then 1 by submission. That's pretty good. I mean, for a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience as a pro, he does have obviously more amateur experience. You got to look at that too, right? It's not just the pro fights. Let's take a look at the other guy, Iamak Furtado, 6-3 record here, 33 years old. He's a Brazilian fighter from African background. He's from Guinea-Bissau, which is pretty cool. So I don't think there's too many fighters in there in Bellator UFC right now. Looking at this guy's record, 6-3. He's coming off 2 straight losses, though, Kiefer Crosby and Carlos Eduardo. Crosby guy is just an okay fighter. That fight was earlier this year. I remember that. I think he was a big favorite there anyways. But, looking at this guy's record, I mean, it's definitely not great either. So he does have, this guy is 44-17. I mean, that's an okay win, I guess. But, again, I don't know a lot about both these guys. I don't think a lot of us do. But based on what I've seen, I mean, how do you go against Duncan here, really? Undefeated fighter, probably younger guy. I mean, he doesn't have the age listed, but I'm assuming he's younger than 33. So I think I'm going to go with Duncan here. But again, minus 250 and a guy that's not really proven, that's kind of pushing it, I think. So if you're going to parlay him, I think be careful, but he should win. I would pick Duncan here, probably by stoppage, if I had to guess. This guy's only been stopped once, but Duncan can finish a lot of guys with his strikes. So that's kind of how I lean in that one. Looking back at the card now, next fight, Brian Moore against Simone de Anna. Looking at the odds for this one, Brian Moore minus 180, Simone de Anna plus 150. So Brian Moore, let's take a look at Brian Moore here. 12-7 record, Irish fighter. 33 years old as well. A lot of older guys in this card. He's an SPG guy. I'm kind of familiar with this guy. I mean, he's been around for a while. Obviously, he's fought in some smaller shows in Europe. And then obviously Cage Warriors. That's where I remember this guy from, Bama. And then Bellator. He's actually got 5 fights in Bellator, 6 fights. He's 3-3. So not bad. You look at the losses, Daniel Weichel, Adrian McKee, and Noah Lahat. That's a former UFC guy and then 2 really good featherweights. So not bad losses. The 3 wins, though, don't really know much about these guys. But, this is an experienced guy. He's been around for a while. His opponent here, Simone D'Anna, 7-2 record. He's an Italian fighter, so he will be fighting from home. Only 25 years old, so that's a good thing there. He's an American top team Rowan guy, so I believe Sakara would be his training partner. Looking at this guy's record, 3 straight wins, but only 1 fight in Bellator. He got knocked out with a head kick in 6 seconds. I don't know if I've seen that fight, actually. I'll have to go back and watch that, but 6-second knockout. Does have a lot of finishes, which is good to see. He's young, so definitely I think this guy can pull off the upset. Plus 150 odds. I think he possibly could pull off the upset. Moore is the more experienced guy. That's why he is the favorite right now. But this guy could definitely pull it off. So again, you got to be careful with these fights. These are not proven guys, so don't go crazy on it. I think it's dog or pass. I guess I'd slightly lean towards Moore just due to the experience, but I think it's dog or pass. This guy has a lot of things going in his favor. He's fighting at home. He's a lot younger. Now, with no fans, I don't know how much the home field advantage matters right now, but you know what I'm saying. So, next fight, Norbert Novenyi Jr. against Lade Zerrouni. Right now, Novenyi minus 550, Zerrouni plus 400. I'm pretty sure that Novenyi wins this fight. This looks like a mismatch to me. This is Bellator trying to get this guy another stoppage win. This guy is definitely an interesting prospect. 4-0, Norbert Novenyi Jr. Now, they don't have his age listed. I believe he's in his 20s, so he's pretty young. He's a big dude, and he's 5'11". He's a middleweight. You look at his Bellator run so far, 3-0 in Bellator, 4-0 as a pro. So this guy is pretty good, and he's got a good submission game, right? That's his bread and butter. Now, the thing about this guy is his father was an Olympic athlete, I believe, for Hungary, if I'm not mistaken. So his father won a couple Olympic medals, if I'm not mistaken. So this guy comes from a good athletic background. And I've been impressed with this guy so far in Bellator. I mean, he got 3 wins, right? The Will Fleury fight, he didn't finish him, but the other 2 fights he finished. Fleury is actually a pretty good fighter. He's an underrated guy in Bellator. Now, his opponent here, Lade Zerrouni, you look at the record right away, 7-5. So, I mean, it's not a good record. He's a young guy, 25. But that record definitely bothers me. And then you look at some of his performances here, and his wins look 0-0, 0-0, 1-0, 1-0. I mean, the wins he's had are just awful. And then he's lost a lot. He's lost by submission 4 times. He is coming off a win, so I guess at least he's coming off a win. Bellator often books these guys coming off losses, but there's no way I would take this guy in this fight. I like Novenyi Jr. quite a bit here, guys. I think he wins by submission. There's no prop for it, though, unfortunately. Maybe take a look at that prop if it drops today, because this card is a little bit lower, a little bit earlier today. I think it's like 4 o'clock, so in the afternoon for EST. So definitely take a look online before that card starts. Maybe you'll find a line him by submission. I'm pretty sure he's going to submit this guy in this fight. That's my prediction. That's probably my most confident prediction of the 3 so far. I mean, he's a big favorite, so it's not like I'm a genius here or anything, but I'm pretty sure he wins by stoppage submission. All right, next up, main event, Denise Kyle Holtz against Kate Jackson. And right now we have pretty close odds for this fight. Kate Jackson minus 120, Kyle Holtz minus 110. So basically a pick 'em, slightly towards Jackson. Really super close fight here. And you look at both these fighters, it's you can see why the odds makers have it close. Kate Jackson 11-4-1, 34 years old. So that obviously stands out like kind of a sore form. I don't like betting on fighters that are that old. It's against someone like Kyle Holtz, who's a little bit younger. I'll talk about her in a second. But Jackson, she actually has quite a few fights on for Bellator. She's 3-2 in the promotion. You look at the 3 wins, not amazing, but decent. Colin Schneider, it's not a bad win. Yankova is not bad. And this Lena is not bad either. The 2 losses to Alima Lay McFarlane, we remember that fight. She actually survived the full 5 rounds. And Valerie Letourneau, who's a former UFC fighter. Then you look at her fights on the Contenders or Ultimate Fighter. She beat Ashley Yoder. She has this other win. I don't know Irene Caballo, but Tatiana Suarez, that's her loss on the show. So looking back now, it's almost like this girl probably should have got a fight in the UFC because she beat Ashley Yoder, who's still in the UFC, and then lost to Suarez, who everyone was incredible. So I kind of feel like she got short in the stick. She also fought Joanna back in 2013. So this girl has a lot of experience, and I do like that. Now, Kyle Holtz is an interesting fighter too. 5-2, 31, so a little bit younger, 3 years younger. That does help. Dutch fighter, kickboxer primarily. You look at her record, a lot of fights in Bellator kickboxing. And pretty well too. She's done pretty well. You know, a lot of wins by decision, but she's done pretty well. Now, after the kickboxing thing in 2017, she transitioned to MMA, and since then, she's actually looked really good, 5-1 since transitioning. So, man, I mean, look at some of these wins, like Christina Williams. I'm not saying she's a great fighter, but that's still a nice win. And Jessica Middleton submitted her, and she has a knockout win here. So this girl's pretty good. I think this is a super close fight. I wouldn't go crazy on this one either. My slight lean was towards Jackson because of the experience, but you know, Kyle Holtz is absolutely a wild card in this fight. There's a reason the line's super close because this girl is getting better, and Jackson might be at the same level. So we'll see what happens. But my pick would be Jackson, edge on decision. It's not the greatest main event. We all know that. It's a Bellator main event. It's a weak Bellator main event, but you know, if you want to dig into this fight a bit more, maybe there's a betting opportunity here. So overall, I mean, it's definitely not the greatest card, but I think a lot of us will probably want to throw a bet or something on it. All right, looking at Bellator Euro Series 9. Now, I don't have odds for this. Switch the screen here. Get this one out. I don't have odds for this card because they don't have them up yet, but this is Saturday. So this is Bellator Euro Series 9, Gallagher versus Eleanor. This is on Saturday, apparently. Again, don't have odds. Hopefully get some odds, but looking at this card, more, I think, names. You got James Gallagher here against Cal Eleanor. That's a fight they've wanted to book a few times. Again, no odds, but I'm assuming Gallagher is going to be a big favorite. Charlie Ward here against Andy Manzolo. Charlie Ward's a guy that Bellator seems to love. UFC had him. He wasn't very good in the UFC, but Bellator seems to love this guy, and I don't know. I mean, we'll see. This guy's a lot of wins the guy's facing, but I mean, Charlie Ward's kind of a proven name at this point in Bellator, so he might be favored. Then that Kiefer Crosby guy I mentioned earlier, he's fighting this Charlie Leary guy. I think Crosby, after that last win, probably is favored. And then we even got to like Carl Albrechtsen. This is a guy that is a pretty good prospect at 205. And you got Sinead Kavanaugh against Katarina Lehner. That's not a bad fight. You know, Carl Pellersoli, he was in the UFC for a while. Van Roosmalen, I mean, that's an interesting name too. So there's definitely some decent fights. Ashley Grimshaw, there's some decent fights in this card. I think compared to the other Bellator, this is actually the better card. For some reason, that's the card that got all the shines on CBS Sports Network as the numbered event. But I actually feel like this card actually might be the better card. So, again, no odds, but just wanted to alert you guys that that card is happening on Saturday. Got some questions here. Kevin, how's it going, man? I was looking at the light heavyweight division now with Jon on top. It seems pretty competitive. Anyone in that top six can beat any of the others on any given night. 100%. I agree completely. Said it on Tuesday. I don't know how many title defenses Jon will have. I like Jon. He's a good fighter. He's won a lot of fights. He's proven time and time again he can win as an underdog. I don't want to say I'm doubting the guy because I think he's really good. And stylistically, he can beat a lot of these guys. But this could be a situation where you have a champion that doesn't really even defend his title once because this division, like you said, Kevin, is so competitive. There's so many good guys. Like Yuri Prochaska is, I think, like number 6 or 7. I think he could beat Jan Blachowicz if they fight. Thiago Santos already knocked him out last year. It was last year. It wasn't even that long ago. So he could win that fight. Glover Teixeira, I think, could actually beat him as well. So there's some fights that he can lose against top guys in this division. We'll see what happens. I hope they get him booked quickly. He took like no damage in that Reyes fight, like very little damage. So hopefully they can get him back in there in like maybe February or something, March, something like that. Was that like 6 months? Maybe even sooner, maybe even January. I don't know. But I like Jan a lot. Masio, hey, how's it going, man? I see Yan as a Bisping. It's funny, actually. Bisping posted a photo of them together yesterday. He's like 10 years apart. There's a picture of them, like, I think from this past weekend, and then from 10 years ago where Jan looks so young and Bisping looks so young. It's pretty crazy how much has changed in the last 10 years. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. He's a late bloomer, right? Like, he's got better at an older age. You don't typically see that. The thing about Jan is he's got a good ground game too. You know, it's not just the striking. His ground game is underrated. He is a good, well-rounded guy. But I'm just not convinced that he's going to hold the belt for very long with this division. There's so many good young fighters coming up in this division. And Jon Jones comes back, and he's even more trouble. But we'll see what happens. And Brandon Parker's got a good comment here. Jan isn't the top 205. We all know this. Izzy destroys him. Well, I mean, Izzy's not a 205er, but if they did fight, I mean, that'd be an interesting fight because Izzy's got the long reach. He's got the power. He's got everything, really, the cardio. So Izzy's great. I think that's a really interesting fight. I'd like to see that fight personally, but I don't think we'll see it right now. I think Izzy fights probably Cannonier next, and then Jan probably fights the winner of Santos and Glover. But at some point, that would be an interesting fight. And I just want to get this last comment from Kevin here. I find it a lot more entertaining when the champ is a minus 1,000 favorite every fight. Are you talking about the light heavyweight division or Bellator cards? Because I think it applies to both. I was talking about Bellator and you throw that comment in there. Let's talk about, let's see here. What was next on my list? I mean, we can talk about the Adesanya thing. Might as well. So it's just a good segue because Brandon just mentioned it. So Adesanya and Jones are going back and forth right now. Actually, this morning they're going back and forth. Jones was making fun of Adesanya for his pink hair. He said he's got boobs because of the whole swollen pec thing. That some people are saying he used to take steroids. He's denying it. No idea. He's passing his drug test, so it's hard to say is he on steroids. But Jones said that who knows what he was doing at these old small shows. He called them bum ass shows they used to fight at. Were they even testing at those shows? I have no idea, right? But yeah, these guys are going back and forth, and Jon Jones brought up Izzy's father. Basically said like I think your dad knows I'm going to beat you up or something like that. And then Izzy this morning went to Jon and said, your mom would be not proud of you or whatever. Now, Jon Jones' mom died a couple of years ago. I thought that was a really low blow. I mean, you don't really bring up people's dead family members. It's so low. Both these guys are so immature. It's crazy how immature they are. Like, I like trash talking. Obviously, who doesn't? It's great. I love good fights. Who doesn't? It's great. When you're bringing up dead family members, come on. So lame, guys. Seriously. So, I like both guys as fighters a lot, Jones and Izzy. They both have a lot to work on as far as their maturity goes. I'm not saying I'm the most mature guy in the world either by any means, and there's still stuff I need to work on myself. But come on, guys. Seriously, bringing up the guy's dead mom and basically being like, he brought my dad up first, so I'm going to bring up your dead mom. That's exactly what he wrote. Go on Izzy's Twitter. It's so lame. And again, I like Izzy. He's a great fighter, man. He's awesome. He's a good money-making machine for guys that like to bet on the sport because he's always winning his fights. But I think he's got a lot to work on as far as his maturity goes. And we saw that the other day in the fight with Costa. Great knockout, great performance. The stuff he did after the fight's so weird. It's so dumb, and it's just super weird, honestly. Like, I was telling my girlfriend about it. I'm like, so Izzy humped the guy, and then he basically joked around that he's going to come on him. And she's like, what? Like, it's super weird. If you go and watch the video, I just find it really, really super strange, I get it. I get it. These guys, there's no love lost between Costa and Izzy. The hump thing, that was one thing. The other thing with Eric Albertine, that's just super weird and kind of creepy, to be honest with you. So, love Izzy as a fighter, man, but I don't see anyone could be like, this is hilarious, this is entertaining. It's just super, super weird and super cringe, to be honest with you. So, both these guys, I mean, you want to talk trash, go ahead. But I'd like to see them back it up in the cage. I mean, they're going to sit there and talk on social media, get us to talk about it and write about it. All right, whatever. I mean, we need stuff to talk about, but I'd like to see these guys go at it. I think Jones Izzy's the fight to make. I just don't see it happening right now because Jones is going to go to heavyweight. If he doesn't go to heavyweight, though, I'd rather see him fight Izzy in a super fight than see him fight Jan or whoever. Here's a good question, Kevin Scott. How would Izzy match up against someone like Usman or Colby? That's a really good question, Kevin. So first off, obviously Izzy is a massive middleweight. His height and reach are legendary. I think he's 6'4" with an 80-inch reach, so he'd have a big reach advantage over Usman and Colby. Now, of course, those guys are wrestlers. They're cardio machines. They'd be looking to push the pace, take Izzy to deep waters, grind him out, wrestle him. It's possible. You saw the Kelvin Gastelum fight. That was a knock him out, drag him out war. Kelvin did have some success with the wrestling at times in that fight. But again, the striking, the range, the precision, I would pick Izzy against either of those guys. The size and the reach and the height, I think it's just too insurmountable to overcome. There's a reason we do have weight classes in the sport because guys are so evenly matched now that if there is a weight difference of, in this case, it would be, 15 pounds? I think that would be what it would take to put Izzy over the top against either guy. But they're both interesting matchups, especially Usman. I mean, if Usman keeps winning, and he's winning a lot of fights, there's a lot of contenders left at 170, but just say he picks up a couple more wins, I could see him being one of those guys that wants to move up to 185 at some point. And GSP did it. I think Usman, he looks at GSP as kind of its role model in the sport and the division, and he wants to kind of be like him and defend the belt for a long time. I could definitely see Usman moving up to 185 at some point. Not anytime soon. I think he's got a few more title defenses to make, but as he gets older, as he gets into his mid-late 30s, the weight cutting will be harder to do at 170. And Usman's a guy, I met him in person when I was in Brazil last year. We were on the same flight together coming back home. I'm tall. I'm 6'3". I thought Usman looked even taller than me. I don't know if it's because he just has that thing about him where you look up to him kind of, and I might know if I'm even looking up to him, but he's just kind of it's just that figure, and you can kind of feel that energy from him. So Usman's a big dude, man. Because I'm telling you right now, I'm a tall guy. He was really tall when I met him. So Maybe he matches up decently well against Izzy, but Izzy's a freaking monster, man. 6'4", 80-inch reach. He's a big dude. Or I don't know if he's 6'4". Sorry, I think I'm making a mistake on that one. Let me see how tall he is. Maybe he is. I bet. No, he's 6'4". Okay, no, he's 6'4". So yeah, I mean, physically he does match up with Jon Jones kind of well, actually. Jon Jones is, I think, 6'4", and his reach is 84. So he's got a longer reach, but Izzy's not that far behind him. Kevin, I doubt a strike will be able to compete with Izzy. He's got to bring some elite wrestling or BJJ and neutralize that. Maybe. I mean, it's possible that someone like a guy who's a hybrid fighter, like Leon Edwards, who's good at striking and wrestling, could be that guy that beats him, or Gilbert Burns, who's a guy who's good at both. Those could be the guys that kind of beat him. But right now, excuse me, sorry, I'm talking about the wrong guy. I'm talking about Usman for a second. Sorry. For Izzy, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could see these guys beating him. Guys like Cannonier, I can't see him really win that fight. He's mostly a striker. Gaslam's another guy. I'm just trying to think. Darren Till, I don't see him giving Izzy problems really. Whitaker, I think, could win a rematch potentially. But even him, we saw the first fight, he got knocked out, right? So I'm with you, kind of like you saw Romero that fight. That was the closest fight that Izzy's probably had besides Vettori. But in those fights, he got grinded on. Maybe that's the way to do it. But after that last fight, man, I just don't know how you bet against Izzy. Like, the guy's really good. All right, let's see what else I got here today. So talk about Izzy. Now, one thing I want to talk about here is Conor McGregor. Actually, one thing I want to talk about quickly about Izzy. Chris Weidman called him out. Chris Weidman says, this is a tailor-made matchup for me. I want to fight Adesanya to beat him and ragdoll him. I'm going to beat him with the wrestling. He's right. That's probably the way to game plan against him. I mean, that's exactly what you're saying, Kevin. But I don't know, man. If Chris Weidman fought Izzy, he thinks he's going to ragdoll him. I'm pretty sure Adesanya would be a massive, massive favorite in that fight. And he'd probably win by KO. We know Weidman's chin's not the greatest. All right, let's talk about Conor McGregor. I got to talk about Conor. So Conor and Dustin Poirier have reportedly agreed to a charity MMA fight. They're talking about it on Twitter. Conor posted a poster photo of it. And now Dana White's come out and he said that he's talking to both of them about doing a fight, potentially in the UFC. Now, the thing with Conor and Poirier, first off, I think a rematch does kind of make some sense because both guys need to fight right now. Obviously, they're both kind of having some issues dealing with the UFC and the money problems and stuff like that. But, Conor wants a fight. It seems pretty clear he wants a fight, and Dustin wants a fight too. I don't know if this Tony fight's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, then Conor McGregor or Poirier makes a lot of sense. We did see this fight 6 years ago. Both are different fighters now. Poirier did get KO'd back then. It was in 2014, UFC 178. That was a long time ago, guys, And Poirier fights a lightweight now. He's not featherweight, and same with Conor. They're both different weight classes. Conor's essentially a welterweight at this point. He's a guy who just fights at welterweight because they don't have to cut weight. So I think it'd be a fight that makes sense. A charity MMA fight, open weight. He says it's going to be a sparring match. I think they have to call it that if they're going to do it because they can't call it a fight because they're under contract with the UFC. But that's exactly why I don't think it's going to happen anyways. Dana White's already come out and said that, he's talking to them. I think he'll block it. And he even said, the thing with Conor and Manny Pacquiao last week, according to Dana, Conor was forced to take down his Instagram post because the Saudis threatened to sue him. They said, you're going to take it down 15 minutes, we're going to sue you. Because he said they had to fight in Saudi Arabia. Dana White is probably going to threaten to sue him too. He's like, if you don't take down this poster or, if we don't do this fight in the UFC, we can sue you. Contractually, I don't think there's any way they can actually do this fight. They might be able to do a grappling match, maybe. But I think that even that, they needed the UFC permission. I can't see any way in hell the UFC would let McGregor fight Poirier in a striking battle, even if it's just a sparring match, especially because December 12th is the same date as UFC 256. Usman Burns, Cyborg Anderson. It's not Cyborg Anderson, excuse me, Nunez Anderson. Sorry. But the point is, there's no way the UFC is going to let Conor put on a show the same night as their pay-per-view. No chance. Kevin Scott is not suggesting Weidman. The guy's delusional. Yeah, no, I wasn't saying you were. I just saw the article yesterday. But yeah, I mean, we'll look at the rankings right now. Let's look at the rankings. We'll talk about Izzy for a second here. Let's take a look here, guys. All righty. Let's take a look. Take a look at the rankings. You look at middleweight. Adesanya right, obviously the champ. He's already beat Whitaker. But again, a rematch would be interesting, I think. You look at some of the other guys here. Costa. Now, Costa, I don't think he had fought his best fight. Wally Ishmael's come out and he said that he didn't follow the game plan and they were disappointed in his performance. I think that a rematch could be more competitive, but that fight's not going to happen anytime soon. Costa wants a rematch now. He's not getting it. Cannonier, he's got power. He's got experience, but I think Adesanya just toys with him, beats him up. Hermansson is a really good fighter. He's well-rounded, but we have seen him get stopped before with strikes, and I think that Adesanya probably finishes him. Then you got Romero. The last fight was super close. Bad fight for sure, boring fight, but super close. He made it kind of boring, and that maybe that's the trick to beating Adesanya. I think Adesanya would have a better performance second time around. Till, I like Till, but I don't think he'd have much for Adesanya. Brunson, maybe like that's the kind of style that would probably beat Adesanya. A guy who's like high pace, who has striking, who has really good wrestling, but with that chain, we've already seen them fight too. He got knocked out. Gastelum, we saw him fight super competitive. Probably his most competitive fight besides Romero, I guess. So that's kind of an interesting rematch one day. I don't think it probably happens anytime soon. Weidman, realistically, I mean, he's not that far away. I didn't realize he was ranked number 9 because he was actually out of the top 15 for a while. He beats Akhmedov, and then he gets into number 9. It's kind of high up, but I mean, realistically, he probably gets KO'd. And then you got Hall, he'd get knocked out, and Shabazian, I don't think he'd beat him. Tavares would get fit. We already saw that fight. He beat him by decision. I think he get finished now. And these other guys like Akhmedov, no way. Vettori, they did fight at a split decision, but a couple of years ago, I don't see Adesanya having problems now. And then Heinisch, who's pretty big, powerful dude, but I don't see him having problems either. So honestly, there's no one in the top 15 I would favor over Adesanya at this point. No one. And I don't think any of these guys really beat him, to be completely honest with you. Then again, you look at 205, you got Jon here. It's nice to see Jon up here as the champ. They have to put his belt there, though. He doesn't have his belt. But that's an interesting fight. That is a good fight. These two guys, that's a good fight. But I think all the challenge, it's like Jon Jones. Like he cleaned it out. Now he wants to move to heavyweight because all the challengers are gone. You look at middleweights, he's beat a lot of these guys in the top 10 already. He's got a couple more fights to have, but Adesanya is not that far from where we're talking about him potentially moving up, I think. And we already are talking about it because there's so many good fights here. Like Jan's a good fight. Thiago Santos would be a good fight. Dominic Reyes would be a good fight. Glover would be a good fight. Even Rakic would be a good fight. There was a rumor I saw yesterday of Rakic or Prochazka. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I saw a rumor about it. That would make sense on the rankings. By the way, Uzdimir's supposed to fight Krylov, but Uzdemir has an injury, so he's not fighting him now. Krylov needs an opponent. Anthony Smith wants Johnny Walker, and they have these other guys here in the bottom 15. So and I'm glad to see OSP ranked, by the way. I don't really look at the rankings that much. It's kind of just like a I don't even know, just a quick reference for me. I don't like look at them and be like, all right, this guy shouldn't be 15, but it's nice to see OSP ranked because he's a guy that should have been ranked the whole time, honestly. All those wins he has, all those submissions, all those Von Prue chokes, but wasn't ranked for a while. All right, so yeah, McGregor and Poirier thing, it's definitely something that's happening right now, but I don't know. I have no idea, guys. If I had to guess, they might get this fight done in the UFC. There's just no chance this fight's going to happen for charity outside the octagon. A couple other things I have here. Frank Mir, his daughter, Bella Mir, only 17 years old. She just signed with first-round management. It's Malki Kawa, Jon Jones' longtime manager, Frank Mir's longtime manager. And I read the post. He said, best athlete in Las Vegas, male or female. Her dad's Frank Mir. He's been training her for years. He's been grooming her to do this. So I'm reading the post, and I'm like, whatever. She's just a kid, right? I went and checked her Instagram out. She is a good athlete. She plays a lot of sports, man. Baseball, football, MMA, boxing, grappling, everything. I mean, this girl she looks like a good athlete. So actually, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw. And I think from what I saw as far as her grappling goes, I mean, she's training at Syndicate MMA with Sarah Kaufman. That's her training partner right now. So I think this girl could go far. Her dad's Frank Mir. It's so crazy, right? Like we have the second generation of fighters now coming up. And we've seen it a few other times. Even the Raveni guy I talked about in Bellator, he's a second-generation fighter. But Bella Mir, that's a name to keep out for, guys. So keep an eye out for her. I mean, I don't know how good she really is in MMA. We'll see. But she's making her pro debut. I think she could be someone that gets a couple fights in Vegas on the regional scene there. And then Invicta could sign her. I think Invicta would be a great spot if she can kind of prove that she's actually a decent fighter. And then, who knows? I mean, what could happen one day? But it's too far to look ahead like that. You can't look and be like, oh, this girl's going to be a champ one day in the UFC. Like, who knows? But I do think that based on what I saw, she's a good athlete. And I think she could have some success with the sport, especially with her dad being Frank Mir and her dad being her main coach and training partner. I think that's a huge help, obviously. Here's what Kevin said. I'm excited for Bella. I saw clips of her wrestling against the boys a few years ago, ragdoll guys. Bro, I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw the clips on her Instagram. I was like, this girl is just a kid. She's 17. Then I watched the videos and I'm like, this girl's actually a really good athlete. Like you can just look at her and you can see that she's strong, she's powerful, she's fast. I'll be looking forward to seeing what happens to her MMA debut. I'm sure it'll be covered pretty highly. And obviously, like I said, her dad is a really famous guy. So I'm sure those guys will talk about that fight a lot in the next couple of weeks because I think she's making her pro debut next month. Let's see here. Paul Felder. Love Paul Felder. Paul Felder, one of the top 10 lightweights in the UFC. He says he's open to fighting Michael Chandler. He says he wants to introduce Michael Chandler to the UFC. He wants to be the guy who welcomes Michael Chandler. He says he has a lot of respect for Michael Chandler, and he wants to fight him. He also said that a lot of guys aren't happy that Michael Chandler was tabbed as the backup for the Khabib and Gaethje fight. And honestly, I completely agree with that. I like Michael Chandler a lot. I've always liked Michael Chandler. He's a great fighter. I've been watching him fight for 10 years now. I remember seeing him fight Akihiro Gono back in, I think, 2012 in Ontario at Casino Rama. Knocked him out that night. I remember that, and I was there for that fight. That was an interesting one. Love Michael Chandler. He shouldn't be the backup for this fight. He doesn't deserve it because he doesn't have any fights in the UFC, and he lost 3 fights ago to Patricky Pitbull. So you got guys like Poirier, Ferguson. I mean, these are guys that have been busting their ass for a decade in the UFC. They should be the backup for this fight. Love Chandler. I know what they're doing here. They want to introduce the guy, get it. They want to have him on the big stage on Fight Island, but it's just really bizarre how they tabbed him as a backup and didn't actually give him a fight, even though he's in training camp right now. It's just really strange. So I'd like to see him get a fight. I'd love to see him fight Paul Felder on Fight Island. I think that'd be incredible. It'd be a great fight. I'd probably favor Chandler in that fight a little bit. I love Paul Felder too, but I think I'd favor Chandler, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Like, it feels like they want to keep him as a backup. And that fight's only 3 weeks away. It's not that far away, so we'll see what happens there, but Felder Chandler's a fight I'd watch for sure if they want to do that fight. Carlos Condit, he wants to fight Nick Diaz again. He basically said they have unfinished business. We obviously remember their fight from 2012 at UFC 143. It was a razor-thin fight. It was a unanimous decision for Condit, but it was a super close fight. I remember watching that fight, and everyone was just like, how are the judges going to score this? They ended up giving me the Condit, which I believe 8 years later is still the right call. I know there's a lot of Nick Diaz fans that say 1-2-5 Diaz. He won those 3 rounds, but I think Condit won the fight. Personally, it was super close though, and I think rematch makes sense. Carlos Condit, 5 straight losses. He hasn't won a fight since 2015. He's fighting this weekend against Court McGee. Win or lose, I still think a fight against Nick makes sense. Nick Diaz, he hasn't fought in 5 years as well since the no contest against Anderson Silva. It'll actually be 6 years. So he hasn't won a fight in forever. He hasn't won a fight since 2011 against BJ Penn. He's not that relevant anymore. I get it. Newer fans probably just look at Nick Diaz and kind of think he's a bit of a joke. Same with Carlos Condit. I mean, if you're a newer fan and you're looking at his record, you're like, what is this guy? He sucks. He doesn't. He was amazing for a while. And same with Nick. So I'd be okay with that fight, to be honest with you. I think it'd be a fun fight. It's a fight that makes sense. And a fight that, quite frankly, I agree with Carlos Condit. There is some unfinished business there among fans. The problem is it wouldn't be a main event pay-per-view fight like they were the first time for the interim title when GSP got hurt. This would be probably an undercard fight, right? I mean, Nick Diaz, you'd assume would be on a pay-per-view, probably the co-main event. So maybe they don't think Condit's a worthy opponent at this point. But quite frankly, Nick Diaz has to win a fight. He hasn't won a fight in 9 years, so he's got to win a fight. Kevin Scott, would these more established contenders at 155 be willing to go to Fight Island and train with no fight lined up? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I still find the whole Chandler thing very kind of weird. Like, when have they ever signed a fighter from Bellator or whoever, Pride or wherever, and said, you're going to be the backup, but you're not actually fighting. We're going to train, you're not going to fight. You might fight, but we have no idea. It's really weird. And again, is that something that they wrote into his contract so Bellator didn't match the contract? Because they had the chance to match it, right? I have no idea. I just find it kind of bizarre. I'd like to see Chandler fight someone on that card. I don't think it's kind of just weird that he's training. He'll be prepared for that card. Like, just say Khabib or Gaethje does fall out, which I don't want to happen, but just say it does. At least Chandler would still be on the card, and then the other guy he'd fight, I have no way he would beat. Even if it is Paul Felder, you could always just, find someone short enough for Paul Felder, or just pay him a little bit of money if you want to put Chandler in there. I just think Chandler should have had an opponent for this card. Kevin says Condit Nick in 2020 seems like a Bellator fight, to be honest. Maybe. I mean, Condit, 5 straight losses. It could be 6 straight after this weekend. And Nick hasn't won a fight, like I said. 9 years. 9 years since UFC 137, where he beat BJ Penn. He fight, by the way, and I love BJ Penn, work for his website, but that's the last one he has. All right, couple fight announcements here. First one, Deron winning against Antonio Braga Neto. This is an interesting fight. Deron Winn actually was suspended recently for amphetamine use. I have no idea what he was using, what substance, but he was suspended for 9 months, and he'll be ready to go in December. So it was kind of a shorter suspension than usual, it seems like. But Deron Winn, overall in the UFC 1 and 2. He's coming up back-to-back losses against Mearshart and Stewart. He did beat Spice Lee by decision in a great fight. It was a fight of the night, an amazing fight actually last year. Overall, I mean, this guy's still a prospect, but the biggest problem I've always had with him, 5'6", 185, he's so small. 5'6". Can this guy make 170? I don't know. He's like Daniel Cormier, but a smaller version of him. It's just hard for this guy to cut weight, I think. He's taking on Antonio Braga Neto here. This is a guy I've been hiring for a while. He's 9-3 and 1-0 contests in his MMA career. He actually has 3 fights in the UFC, but you look at his record, his first win in the UFC, Antonio Braga Neto, he's 32 years old now. His first win in the UFC was in 2013 against Anthony Smith, and he submitted him. Then he fought Clint Hester, lost a split in 2014, didn't fight again until 2017, got KO'd by Trevin Giles, and they didn't fight again until December 2020, so 3-year layoff. This guy is actually kind of interesting. I saw a story about him like 2 months ago, maybe. Kambachi had a story on him, and he's like he trains dogs now, I think, or something. Like that's what he's been doing. So this guy, I don't even know if he's really a full-time fighter anymore. He's definitely a good jiu-jitsu guy and everything, but I think you kind of got to favor Deron Winn just based on the activity. The whole PD thing definitely throws it off a little bit. You wonder like if this guy was using something for a long time, but Braga Neto, 1 fight in the last 6 years, guys. Like that's Nick Diaz territory. You don't know Nick Diaz, no fights in 5 years. This guy has 1 fight in 6 years, so it's not that good. The other fight is Darren Elkins against Luiz Garagorri. Now, Garagorri is supposed to fight Versal Bektic, who Darren Elkins knocked out a couple years ago. That fight didn't happen because Garagorri's cornerman tested positive for COVID-19. So fight was scrapped. Darren Elkins now against Garagorri instead. And Darren Elkins, he needs to win this fight. He's lost 4 straight fights. And I like Darren Elkins. He's a veteran. He's been around forever, man. You got to respect the guy. But he's lost 4 straight fights after a 6-fight win streak. So, you look at the losses, and Volkanovski, no shame in that. Lamas, no shame in that. Hall, no shame. The Landwehr fight's a fight he should have won. It was a super close fight, but he lost. That's the guy he has to be at this point of his career. So the UFC respects him. Obviously, they're going to give him another fight here against Garagorri in November. And Luiz Garagorri, 13-1 record, and he has 2 fights in the UFC. He beat Humberto Banini in his debut and then lost to Ricardo Ramos by submission. And he definitely could finish Darren Elkins. Darren Elkins is a durable guy, but over the years his durability diminished a little bit. But Darren Elkins is still a good wrestler. Darren Elkins is still super experienced. I kind of feel like it's going to be a super close line, but I would slightly lean towards Elkins, I think, just based on the fights in the UFC. He says like 20 fights in the UFC, and he's won many times by as an underdog. So underrated guy, and I like Elkins, but man, he's got to snap it. 4-fight losing streak, you can't have that. If you're not like Carlos Condit has a 5-fight losing streak, but that's a former champ. Elkins was never a champ. You lose 5 straight, he's gone from the UFC. So it's a must-win fight. I'm just looking to see what else is there. If anyone else has any questions, throw them in there right now before I get out of here. Let's see here. Johnny Walker, Michelle Pereira, there's a funny video of them last night. They were sparring yesterday and jumping off the wall, as you'd assume. Pereira did a backflip, and Walker did a Superman punch off the wall, so it's kind of cool. So I've checked that out. Volkanovski was in the news. He did an interview with Mike Hack, and he said that he wants to fight someone soon. He wants to get back in the octagon before the end of the year, like December or January, he said. So he's looking at the winner of Zombie and Ortega, which makes a lot of sense, especially if it's Zombie, because if Zombie wins that fight, it'd be a lot of momentum for a title shot. He also mentions Zabit, but he's like, where's Zabit and Yair? Why aren't these guys fighting? And I think a lot of fans are wondering the same thing, like, why are these guys fighting? The other guy he mentioned was Calvin Kattar, which is an interesting guy because basically what Volkanovski said was, I have a lot of respect for Calvin Kattar. He's fighting when a lot of guys aren't fighting. He's actually stepping in the octagon, fighting and beating guys. So, Calvin Kattar, he does have that lost as a beat just a year ago. It was last November, but he's been super active, and you got to respect the guys. So I think Kattar could get that fight. It's definitely possible. Here's a great question. Kevin Scott, thoughts on Esther Lin leaving MMA? Great question. So Esther Lin was the photographer for MMAfighting.com for many years, and she was a photographer of many of the greatest photos in MMA history. I'm trying to think of some good ones, but like Anderson Silva against Chael Sonnen, she got that famous picture of the triangle choke, and there's a bunch of other ones like Machida, I think when he knocked out I don't remember who it was, Munoz maybe? I can't remember, but she's got a lot of really good iconic photos, like tons. There's a whole list of them. Someone posted it yesterday. I was looking through them. Just can't remember them all. She's a great photographer. I mean, she's one of the best, probably the best that MMA's had. I was surprised when I saw the news. When I read the news, I assumed that someone like she got let go, right? And that's what I assumed. I think a lot of people would have assumed that just based on COVID. I know MMA fighting has let go of some other guys the last couple months, but she announced that she actually made the decision to quit. She quit her job because she said, I haven't shot anything since March. And she said that she's been talking to the UFC and they won't give her credentials for some reason. I guess they're not allowing photographers, or there's something else going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, because it's kind of weird, right? Like, is there no photographers right now? Is it just the UFC guy? I'm not sure, but she hasn't been able to shoot in 6 months. And she said that she's going to do some voiceover work now, stuff like outside MMA. And I guess the door's always open to return to MMA, but it's one of these things where she even said, I'm taking a risk by quitting a full-time job to pursue some other opportunities. That's always a risk. I have quit a job in the past, and multiple jobs. It's super risky because a lot of time you quit and you don't find another job for a while. You usually want to find a job before you quit, but sometimes it's just not possible. If it's a really bad situation, toxic situation, or a situation where in Esther's case, she felt like she was probably stuck, like she wasn't kind of growing or whatever, and she's stuck and she's thinking, can I even take pictures? Can I even do my job, which is her job as a photographer? She can't go to events. So her leaving, I mean, it sucks, but I can definitely see her rationale behind it. Now, at the same time, though, a lot of people are taking this a little bit too far, I think. I mean, it's definitely a loss for the sport. I think it's a big loss. She didn't die, guys. Like, she could always come back. The pandemic's screwed a lot of people, and I think that photographers, it's not even someone I thought about, but they definitely got screwed here. But she didn't die. She could come back in a couple of years, and I think she probably will, because I think there'll be a market for her services because she is really good at her job. But, as far as her leaving the sport, I mean, a lot of people have stepped away. I've been covering the sport for almost 10 years now, and a lot of people I've met along the way have stepped away. There's been so many people have come and gone. It's always surprising, though, when someone who's been doing it for a little bit longer than you, and she's been doing it for a few years longer than me, leaves before you. So it's always definitely surprising, but I think in her case, she had some rationale behind it. At least it wasn't just like she was pissed off and just quit. I think she had a lot of pent-up frustration about the fact she wasn't able to do her job the way she wanted to. And yes, she was still employed by Vox and fighting, and chose to leave her position. So, it's always a risk, but hopefully it works out for her. Kevin Scott, Robbie Rory stare down. I mean, that is absolute classic, man. And you're 100% right. I mean, what a classic. She's one of the best. So, yeah, it's a big loss to the sport. I just hope people realize, like, she doesn't have cancer. She didn't die. She could come back in a couple of years, So don't mourn her loss. Be upset that she left, and hope that there's someone else that could take her spot. But if not, she'll be back, hopefully. Massio, fight tonight this weekend. I love this question, Massio. You should ask me every week this one. Now, looking at this card, I can't remember if you saw the chat the other day, Massio, if you were in there or not. I don't think you were. But either way, if you missed it, there's a few fights that I kind of singled out as potential fight of the nights. I think the Condit McGee fight could be actually really good, because you look at Condit and McGee, and they're high volume strikers. McGee actually throws with a lot more volume than one would have expected if you don't look at his stats. I think he absolutely could win this fight. So Condit could too, and he's an underdog right now. I think it's a really competitive fight. It'll stay standing. I think these guys are going to strike each other. So that would probably be one of my sleeper picks, Conor McGee. It's on the prelims, though, so they usually pick a fight from the main card, usually. And if that's the case, I think that the fight that just landed on the main card, Cameron Ellis against Kyler Phillips, could win. Kyler Phillips just won fight of the night. His last fight against Gabriel Silva was a really high-action fight. I don't know a lot about this Ellis guy. Looking at his record, he's kind of lost a few times, and it kind of worries me against Phillips, so maybe he finishes him quick. But if the fight goes to full 3, it could be a really fun fight. And then looking at the prelims, this guy, Casey Kenny, who's a really exciting guy, against Hailey Alatang, who's won fight of the night. That could be a potential one as well. I guess you have to mention the main event, Ho Maldonado, but I have a feeling it's going to be boring. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, guys, but I have a feeling it's going to be a boring fight. I hope I'm wrong, though. Gabriel Trabuzzi, let's go, Quad. Love from Rio, Brazil. I wish I knew what you're saying, because you have some Brazilian, Portuguese in there, but I love you too, man. I'm glad you're here for the podcast today. All right, let's see what else we got here, guys. Got a few more minutes, and then I'll get out of here. As far as news goes, let's see here. There's a bunch of stuff, but nothing like super burning, I don't think. Just Jones and Izzy's going back and forth. Anyways, I think that's it for today. Because I'm looking, I don't really see much else. So that's it for today's podcast. I appreciate you guys joining me and asking questions. I love it. Keep sending them in. The next podcast will be Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'll be breaking down the next UFC card with Cole. So definitely check that out. I think that's Tommy Ortega, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely check that out. It could be wrong. Let me make sure I didn't say that wrong. Let's see here. It's Sanhagen Moraes. So I'll be and Ortega's next week. But yeah, Sanhagen Moraes is next Tuesday. In the meantime, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. The podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. It's on our YouTube channel. It's on Spotify. It's on Anchor. It's on iTunes, Google Hangout, Google Podcasts, everywhere. Everywhere you get your podcast, subscribe, like, tell your friends about it. I'm trying to grow the show. It's growing slowly, but I'm trying to get it there, guys. It's fun to do. I love doing it with you guys. So definitely keep tuning in, asking questions. Love it. BJPen.com, always posting the news there. MMARings.net, I posted an article this week over there about Izzy and what he needs to do to become the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Right now, he's number 3. He's behind Habib and Jon Jones. I have some ideas of how he could jump to that number one spot. So go and check that out at MMARings.net. And one last thing from Massey here. Phillips by sub plus 500. Absolutely could happen, for sure. I think Phillips could definitely submit this guy or knock him out. But I think that sub prop's worth it for sure. Because you look at his record, he's got some subs. That's it, guys, for today's podcast. Really appreciate you joining me, and I'll be back on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Hope you enjoy Bellator today, UFC this weekend, and Bellator this weekend as well. Have a good one. Bye.